Wonderful book you've written, Glenn. Just incredibly complete and complex and well designed. And it's really, isn't it a blueprint really for like an architect writes a blueprint, and then the engineers come to build the blueprint into reality. This is a wonderful blueprint in my view. And the difficulties I have, as we all have, I'm sure, is to put it into reality, how to implement these things into physical reality. The other little question I have, second question, is about the constituent assemblies that were active before, during this book was being written. If you could answer these two questions, which are difficult questions, particularly the first one, Glenn.
Is it a blueprint, and you have something about the constituent assemblies? What did you want to know about that?
I wanted to know this blueprint that you have beautifully written. How can we bring it into reality, physical reality, like we need to? Obviously, this is a theory. How do we practice it?
Thank you, Simon. I didn't write the Constitution, as you know, right? It was written by hundreds of world citizens working together in those, and the high points were those 4 constituent assemblies, right? So it was finished by 1991 in the 4th assembly, and I didn't even find out about it or join it until 1995. So it was already finished when what I've done here with this book is put it in the framework of history and commentary and so on. In spite of what Bob said to hold off on promotion, I just want to mention that I've got a new book coming out.
You're the exception, Glenn, to that.
Oh, my new book is going to be launched in May, and it's called Design for a Living Planet, the Earth Constitution Solution. And I agree with you, Simon, 100% that this offers a blueprint. And this blueprint is, I argue that we don't have time. Like, the World Federalist Movement in Europe thinks we got to elect citizens who then will elect a constituent assembly, who will then write a constitution. We don't have time. The earth is falling apart. All right, nuclear weapons might wipe us all out at any time. So we have to act. My argument is that we have to act on this blueprint, and the blueprint, like any good constitution, has an article that is used only once, and that's the article that says, how does this get ratified? And that's Article 17. All right, and we'll look at that. I'm sure you'll all have questions on that, so I won't go into that in detail, but Article 17 shows how the people of Earth can ratify it, right? It has to be democratically ratified by the people and nations of Earth. No one can impose it, right? And in one other article, Article 19, which is very important because the last article allows human beings to start it now, as far in a provisional world government, right? And that's what these provisional world parliaments, they're the main thing that we have begun. We've had 14 sessions, and the 15th session is coming up in December. So, this is governmental. We're saying we're starting it, and we want the people of Earth to say, here we have a blueprint, and we're effectively trying to start it. You need to respond to this. All right. So anyway, I hope that addresses your question, Simon.
Great. Go ahead, Simon. But I just want to remind people we have the preamble and 9 articles to go through. So that's why I was a little leery about doing this each time. But let's try it. But we need to be brief. Let's get in. Yeah, let me get anybody in who has not yet spoken. So Gail, you're up next. You need to unmute yourself. Okay. And then we'll move on.
Yeah, I was wondering, there's mention of a new world order, and I wondered, that it's been talked about very recently by Klaus Schwab, and I wondered if it was referring to that or if it was referring more generally to something else. I also wanted to mention that we have a new member, Maria Inez Ramirez from Asuncion, Paraguay. So welcome.
Welcome. Hello. That's another, like the word men, right, that was pointed out before. That's another unfortunate expression. The phrase New World Order didn't get the bad connotations that it now has until George H. Bush, right, started talking about creating a New World Order dominated by global banking and globalized multinational corporations and so on. So we now speak of a new world system. We use the word system intentionally to try to, whenever we write anything, explain anything, we say that we're in a race against the New World Order, right? We don't want that to happen. So we can look at a totalitarianism of the rich and powerful nations and corporations, or we can look at a world democracy. That's our choice. One is a New World Order, the other is a New World System.
Great, thank you. I'm going to, due to the time, I'm going to move us on to Article 1. So Glenn, anything you would like to say about that? And then we'll go back to our questions and comments.
So this, as you know, spells out the broad functions, right, of the Earth Federation. And these functions cover the range of what a world government, a democratic world government, could and should be doing, in my view. And so prevent the number one, very important. If we want to save the global environment, in my argument, we can't do it unless we stop the war system, the national war system that spends 1.8 trillion US a year on war and armaments and nuclear weapons and the rest of it. Prevent war, secure disarmament, protect universal human rights, right? And those are articulated in detail in Articles 12 and 13. Obtain for all people on Earth conditions required for equitable economic and social development and diminishing social differences. Justice, in other words, distributive justice, so that we end poverty on the Earth. Regulate world trade and all those things necessary for an integrated world system. And then 1.5, protect the environment and the ecological fabric of life from all sources of damage. Control technological innovations whose effects transcend national boundaries for the purpose of keeping the Earth a safe, healthy, and happy home for humanity. And in my new book that's just coming out, I point out the immense number of passages throughout the Constitution that have to do with that, with the global environment and so on. And then the last one, which I think is absolutely fundamental because it addresses the spirit of the Constitution, to devise and implement solutions to all problems beyond the capacity of national governments, right? No government on Earth can create peace. No government on Earth can disarm the world. No government on Earth can protect the environment because the environment is global. It's not territorial. And so, any solutions that, if we have a planetary civilization, the function of the world government is to make sure it's a decent and just and sustainable civilization. Okay, questions? Any questions or thoughts?
Okay, I'll take a cue. So I see Donna first. Any other hands? Going once. I'll put myself in. Okay, Donna, take it away.
Hi, Glenn. Like David, I find, and Simon, I find the Constitution very inspiring and very complete but also a bit overwhelming. And I agree with you completely that we're running out of time. We don't have a lot of time, but I think we also have a lot of people who distrust government. And so this list of all the broad functions, I find a bit off-putting. And I'm an advocate for World Federation, but maybe it's that I've been hanging out with Soveda Mahani Ewing too much, and I'm starting to win over to her, or enough that she proposes that perhaps we should start a little smaller, like let the government tackle the environment and human rights and maybe nuclear weapons or something, like try to pick 3 things and let people become more comfortable that, okay, this is going to work. It's not going to become tyranny. We're not going to eliminate the nations. We're not going to take away everybody's guns in the U.S. or whatever other countries are worried about. Anyway, and then expand it. So, I mean, I don't know. Do you have any comments on that? Can you allay my fears or something? I don't know. It just seems like it's a lot to ask people to buy into.
In One World Renaissance, my 2016 book, chapter 7 addresses that question, because it's people ask it all the time. This is a very powerful government, right? And just wait till we get to Article 4, right? If you're worried about Article 1, right? And I often respond as a philosopher, Hannah Arendt. As you know, she was a famous political philosopher in the U.S. She writes about political issues, and she says the problem is not power; the problem is violence. And she says if a government has the overwhelming consent of the governed, and the government governed are very clear that it is addressing the common good of everybody, it will be powerful. It should be powerful, right? And she argues that the weaker a government is, the more it results to violence. Right? We think of Black Lives Matter, right? If the government was powerful and embracive, they wouldn't be repressed by the police the way they are, but our government is not as legitimate as we might hope, and so on. And the less legitimate, the more they result to violence. But I think, in order to address the rest of your question, I think that the transformation needs to be comprehensive. That, as I was saying a moment ago, I don't think we can protect the environment without disarming the nations and creating a peace system in the world. I think all these things go together, because we're in a world system now, right? A broken world system of capitalist, super rich corporations doing whatever the hell they want, and nations and so on. And unless we overcome that fragmentation and really join holistically together in what the spiritual people call a new level of consciousness, right? You've probably heard, the second axial age we're supposed to be in. So in my view is that we really need to be thinking differently, and that this kind of transformation that's going on in this Constitution, proposed Constitution, this transformation is complete because it sees that we have to be living on a new level. We just can't evolve the old, and say, oh, we need incremental changes. We need to be thinking differently, right? Thinking in terms of our common humanity and so on. So anyway, that's, I won't go into it because Bob is worried about getting through more of the, but that's my response. I think we do need powerful government, and but when we look at these articles, we'll see that all kinds of checks and balances are built in, right? I think it's very, very safe. And as I say, I've written about this in chapter 7 of One World Renaissance, and that chapter is now on our website, earthconstitution.world website, because the question is often asked. So you can go to the website and see my arguments there. Okay.
Thank you. As Glenn was talking, I thought I saw 2 more people raise their hands, so I want to check. Bharat, I saw you first. Was that yes? And then Simon, correct? Okay, so I'm in line next, then I'll get Bharat and Simon, then we'll move on to the next article. So actually, Donna often reads my mind, and she did with her question. So I'll ask just a small part of that, and also make a quick comment. That yeah. So my understanding, when I've looked at different proposals for a world government, what it might look like, they do go on a spectrum from, what they call themselves minimalist, like let's just end war, let's just do this, let's just do that, to what Juncker said in what he called it pejoratively in his book, which we read, is the the omnipotent world state. Something at the other end that is just so encompassing, so whatever. And it does seem from the different proposals I've seen that this is the most omnipotent. I mean, this is the one that is the most comprehensive. Not to say it's a bad thing, but it does seem like the most inclusive. My question then, other than the concerns that some people would have and resistance to it, is I'm just curious, has anyone done a breakdown of the size of the staff of this world government, this blueprint, and what the budget would be? I know later on we'll talk about how it gets funded. I think that's in a later article. Right. But how big is it? How many staff people will this world government have, and how much will it cost?
You think I'm kind of like a prophet? I can tell you that.
No, I'm wondering, has anybody worked that out? It seems like you'd be able to.
Well, Eugenia Allman has done some work in that area. And in various sessions of the Provisional World Parliament, we have talked about funding for laws, and the funding is huge, right? And it's huge because we're talking about planet Earth, all of planet Earth. And just as, this is not a government that's going to be located in some country, Great Britain or whatever, right? It's going to have offices everywhere around the planet, just like in the United States. The U.S. government has offices, FBI and tax offices and all kinds of, they have it everywhere, right? Roanoke is, there's offices right near where I am, and so on. And so it will be part of the infrastructure of the world, right? And lots of people, just like I live in a town of 15,000 people, and lots of them work for the city government, right? They work for maintenance, they work for the treasury, they work, we pay bills there, they have a parking, there's lots of people that work for government. And I think it'll be the same. I think it'll be kind of an accepted, and we citizens of Radford are not hostile to them. In fact, we respect them. They do great work for us, and we're happy to pay taxes. And so I think that it will be, as I said before, it'll be a whole different attitude toward government, and government will know, in the United States, as we know, the founders came from the Lockean tradition, right? Thomas Jefferson they were all followers of John Locke. And Locke said human beings have natural rights prior to government, and the government has to be minimalist. It must protect those rights. So there's this hostility between the natural freedoms and rights in Locke's philosophy and government. But I think that Locke was mistaken. I think Rousseau was much better, and Kant was much better in their envisioning of what a social contract would be like. So anyway, that's short answer, Bob. I don't know if that, is that okay?
Great. Yeah, no, anything you say is what you say. So anything that's okay. I say. Yeah, just wanted to get your answer. Thank you. Okay, so then let's get Bharat in, then Simon, and then we'll move on to the next article. Go ahead, Bharat.
Hello, Glenn. Thank you very much. I'm amazed at your idealism and comprehensive sense of seeing a humanity's future. I applaud you for that. But I have a couple questions that concern me. One is seeing the nature of human beings as it has evolved over the centuries, the kinds of mistrust we have. We saw a lot of that in this trial that's taking place in Washington, D.C., where even another person's word is like seen as, total anathema. So
Right.
it seems to me that in order to actualize the conception of the world constitution, there needs to be some steps that'll have to be taken. And my feeling is perhaps it has to begin with not our generation. I don't know if we are capable to really transform ourselves to behave like that. But maybe the young generation to be born, and maybe the very young one. And it seems all cultures have evolved because of education, with being a key to that. So the question I have is there a kind of an educational plan that begins right at the point of conception or infinity, infancy, I mean, that we evolve so now the final question is, when do you see this become real? Is there any kind of a sense of a timeline for this? Anyway,
those are, Bharat, thank you for those questions. They're huge questions. Just like every question that people have asked up till now is huge. It isn't just Article 1, right? These are huge questions. There's a movement, as you all may know, having to do with there's a whole group called evolutionary leaders, right? And we just had a Zoom meeting with them Wednesday, and some of them, and so they go by this thing called spiral dynamics, or Ken Wilber's stages of moral and spiritual development, and there's a lot I've written on this, and I include this in my forthcoming book, and I also included in my last book, Global Democracy and Human Self-Transcendence, right? That's the name of that, human self-transcendence. I think we're capable of this kind of self-transcendence. And so there are stages. When we're young, we're egoistic, right? And as we develop and get acculturated, we become, in these stages, we become ethnocentric, right? We think somehow that what we grew up in somehow is common sense. But then as we grow, we begin to realize that people around the world look at things differently than we do. And we become world-centric, right? And respectful and tolerant, like the World Parliament of Religions. We embrace one another and engage in dialogue and so on. But there's another level that Ken Wilber and these thinkers talk about, and that they call it cosmocentric, right? That there are spiritual levels, and human beings are destined to be moving through these spiritual levels. And so the question becomes, how can we activate a spiritual renaissance for humanity, right? It's possible. If we look in history, we see that realizations here and there have taken place suddenly. The Renaissance, for example, suddenly everybody was thinking differently in the Renaissance, 15th century Italy. And so we think, some people think, I think, that we're on the verge of another Renaissance, that global consciousness, the environmentalists are all saying, unless we have global consciousness, we're not going to have a future on this planet. We have to be aware that the biosphere is, we're absolutely dependent upon it. And right now we're destroying it. And so global consciousness, biosphere consciousness, holistic consciousness, these are things that are happening in us. There's a kind of growth process. And this is the final point I want to make here. In my argument, the Constitution is not simply an end of a goal where spiritually awakened people have to how they'll be living, but it's also a means, because insofar as we talk about this, as we promote it, as we interact with people about it, people are looking at it, and just the thinking about it, just the looking at the design, just thinking about how human life could really be differently is a spiritual catalyst to help people become world-centric. Anyway, that's in a short form, that's my argument there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. I'm going to get Simon in and then Arthur, but let me, since about 3 or 4 people joined us after we started and I laid out the guidelines, I just want to repeat for those who haven't heard. First, please be brief in your question or comment. Secondly, if you're promoting something like a book you wrote, an organization you have, a program you give, please save that till the end and don't do the promotion during the Q&A period. There will be time at the end. Thank you. Simon, you got it.
Again, thank you, everyone. Glenn also. The question I have, Glenn, is the following. We have had this federalism since 1947 and Citizens for Global Society, that's 74 years now this year. However, in 1949, 2 years after that, arose the European Union idea, 1949, and they immediately embraced it. And most of these ideas about holism are incorporated in the European Union rather than European federalism. Yes. Our country, our USA is federal, but you see what the problems we have here in federalism. But the Union created the peace for 72 years since 49. They are living with free healthcare, free education up to the PhD level. They are doing all these things in practice for 72 years. So why not start maybe like a world union? That is my idea, where somebody can exit if they don't like it, like Britain exited. Because what happened, as you know, because the world was not like the European Union, the refugees came and mixed it up, gave trouble to the European Union. And so they are in trouble now because the world is not like them. And these not like them world came and interfered with them and began to spoil them. So if we could have a world union, then maybe this could be put into practice like the extension of the European Union, which is my idea, which works until we go to the federal system, if we don't, because the federal, you can't get out. The world union, you can get out if you don't like it.
Actually, the Constitution, we'll see next time when we look at the rest of it, it does make provision for people being outside it, right? They can get out, right? That once you're committed to the federal, you don't get out, but as individuals, as groups, they can move outside. It makes it says reserving, I believe, 10% of the world's good land or whatever for people who don't want to be part of the Federation. But nevertheless, in my view, to most people, it'll be self-evident that they want to be part of the Federation, right? Just as you were saying about the European Union, how nice to live in Denmark or those other nations where you have healthcare and decent wages and a peaceful social environment and so on. That's what we need for the world, right? And once people see that the Earth Constitution will realize that for the world, it'll get rid of the terrible global south of poverty exploited by global banking in favor of the global north. All of that will be gone, right? And we'll have a decent global civilization. And who's maybe a few people will want to escape it, but most people will say this is wonderful, right? We don't want, we like this. It makes possible a decent life for everybody. So anyway, that's my thought on that. But as I was saying before, Simon, this is a blueprint that right now is considered final. It isn't like a draft. We're trying to get it ratified, because if it was a draft, you couldn't ratify it under Article 17. right? Because you got to have a, you know, a concrete document that if you're going to have voting and ratification. So this is the concrete document. If it needs modification, that can be done after ratification, as I was saying before.
What is ratification?
Thank you, Glenn.
Who's involved with ratification? Who is involved in the world?
Well, we'll look at that with Article 17.
Okay.
Right. Today we're only doing up to Article 9.
Great. Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you.